Real estate agents, we get many questions about the current market and the home buying process as a whole. My name is Shawn, and this is Raul, and we are with the Schrader Group, brokered by eXp Realty. So Raul, what is the first step all buyers need to make to purchase a home?
Well, I think in our climate, what the first step is figuring out why we want to get out of our current situation. Once a buyer figures out that they want to buy, it's about figuring out what they can afford. And I always send them to a lender. That way we get an idea of what their budget is.
How long would you say it normally takes to buy a home?
Well, that's a loaded question. So with that being said, I mean, in a perfect world, we get qualified, we go out, see a couple houses on a weekend, maybe 2 weekends, go under contract. From start to finish that contract, we're probably looking at about 30 to 45 days when we hit a contract and get it accepted. We go in what's called an offer period, where I like to say it's the due diligence side. We get an inspector, we get them in there, they look through the house, see if there's any kind of red flags. And then we go and we get the appraisal done, and we're just taking the steps to get through closing with the lender, with the title company, and make sure we get to the finish line.
One of the biggest questions we have coming through here is what is a title commitment? And why is it needed?
Well, if you think about a car, right? When you buy a car from somebody, you want to make sure it's a blue title, which means that there's no damage on it, there's no liens or anything like that. The same story is on the flip side when we're buying real estate. We want to make sure that not only is the buyer getting a clear title, there's no liens, judgments, foreclosures. Make sure there's no promises or HOA liens that are tied to the property, because the lender is also going to be saying, hey, I'm buying this house, but I want to make sure that the buyer's taken care of. And also, they don't want to get into a property that's not going to be theirs at the end because there's 3 or 4 other people that are tied to it. So it's really just protection for the buyer to make sure that when they do purchase the house, they're getting a clean title.
And an appraisal?
Appraisal. What are appraisals? Appraisal is a way for the lender, the buyer, to be protected. That if they're paying $300,000 for a house, it's worth $300,000. It gives values based off of recent comparables that have sold. So if a house sold yesterday for $300,000 and we're under contract for $310,000, they're going to use that price per foot to try to get the evaluation of where that $310,000 is, and at least be able to justify it based off of likable comps, likable attributes to the house. Does it have a deck? Does it have a bay window? Do we have stainless steel appliances? What does it look like?
What does a realtor do, and why do most people need one?
Well, realtors are actually, we wear a lot of hats, but ultimately we are taking a buyer's biggest purchase probably in their lives, and they're putting trust in us to make sure that we help navigate the process. They want to know, does this sound normal? Is this fair? What would you say? I always say, look, when I have a buyer in my car, or if I have a buyer on my docket, I always say, hey, I'm going to treat you like family. This is what I would do, and this is why I would do it.
If you wouldn't mind, explain to the people at home how you get paid, because that is the biggest conversation starter whenever we talk about realtors.
So when we're on the buy side, the best part is the sellers pay us. So it's almost as if we're being represented. We're representing you guys, but we're getting compensated by the sell side. So that's always a win-win for the buyers. Whether it's new construction or pre-existing, the seller's always going to come through and give the commission side to the buyer's agent. And that's what's really beautiful about this, because when you go into a transaction, you're already worried about how much money do I have to put down, how much are closing costs, what about all these other things I have to purchase? Well, we come at a value because we're not coming out of your pocket. The sellers are actually taking care of us to represent the transaction and make sure the transaction actually closes and get everything done in between. So we're at the value to the buyers because the sellers are taking care of us.
Okay, so exactly 0% comes out of your pocket if you're a buyer. And then the last question I have for you is a closing process. What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit in what happens from option time to pending, but let's just say we've gotten through all that, and we have a closing on Friday at 12 o'clock. Today is Wednesday, so we look at it and say, okay, we're going to have a final walkthrough on, say, Thursday evening or Friday morning. Then we're going to set up a closing time at the title company. At that point, we've already received the CD, the closing disclosure, to kind of go over all the numbers, make sure everything makes sense. The lender's going to send out a wire or wire instructions to how to get the money to title. And then ultimately what ends up happening, we go sign, the buyer or the seller will go sign as well. And it won't actually fund until both parties have signed and the lender sent lending authorization or funding authorization. And at that point, we might or might not get the keys because sometimes the seller's like, I don't want to give out keys unless I know I got my money, which makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes once we get the funding authorization, that's kind of like the green light saying that, hey, it's backed and you're going to get the keys. So typically we'll get that. And typically if we're doing it on a Friday, then we get the keys for moving day on Saturday and Sunday. So it's a fun process. It's exciting. It's a lot of ups and downs, but it's rewarding at the very end when you're able to get to that closing table and just say it was all worth it.